Previously on Unpacked.
One of our houses was bombed.
And this white cop gave me my teddy bear back, and I was terrified of the white cop.
It's easy for a person that doesn't know to hear one Exile story and then paint everybody with it.
I was already aware that, okay, we're going to enemy camp. I think I became a lot more aware of my place in the greater makeup, but also at home, because she had kids, I had now nephews, so there were more kids to respond to, and I was a lot more responsible to them, just like you would be in a South African household, you know, and it gave me, I think, time to myself to say, okay, fine, if I'm going to kind of survive this, I'll need to be a lot more, you know, clued up with what was going on. And funny enough, it almost prepared me for the move to the Netherlands, because that's when I was already aware that, okay, we're going to enemy camp. We're going to, you know, the Dutch sounds like Afrikaans.
And did you deduce that on your own, or somebody actually told you? And why the Netherlands? Because a person would be thinking, excuse me, why of all the places, the Netherlands?
There was a large network with the anti-apartheid active. Like, there was a lady that actually was a family friend because she had helped my father before. While they were that side, you know, with the musicians, the Amandla troupe, and the many programs that they had that allowed them to travel, the Netherlands was a safe house. So was a place where they could actually go and seek refuge, because
no one would suspect that black people would be hiding there.
Well, they were quite vocal. They've been very vocal, the Dutch, before, especially since the Second World War, you know, about, you know, human rights, civil rights. So there was a lady there, Tineke van den Klinkenberg, who was obviously one of the volunteers. And she opted to take us in. She's like, listen, you go to the States, I'll take your 2 kids. And this is us now. We had met her before. She had visited us in the UK, but now we're going over to another place, another language,
starting
another
afresh.
culture, left my friends behind, but this time I'm also leaving family behind, because my nephew was there as well, my 2 nephews and niece. But this time I'm a bit more aware of my skin, you know, and I'm a bit more aware of what's going on. I know where SA is. I know where the Netherlands is. I know where UK is. But the difference is I don't have my parents. You know, you don't have that support system. And that was key in Exile. That support system was everything. You know, it's where you ate, where you slept, how you got a recognition. I mean, I remember us going to the ANC offices, that's what we used to call them. So little hubs where people used to connect. And they used to make us draw pictures of how we thought Nelson Mandela looked like. And those pictures would be printed and used as celebration, you know?
Oh, wow.
So
I literally just got goosebumps as you're sharing that with me, because these are things that we just don't think of if we didn't live that experience. And I mean, I can understand why it was important, because he was hidden away for so long, and obviously his images were trying to be... Did your picture that you drew, was it close enough?
I'd like to think it was, you know.
But that's a beautiful story.
I remember it going up against all the other kids, but we did struggle songs as well, you know. We shared a lot of the stuff that kept us going, kept the fuel kind of, you know? And that was the whole point, to say, listen, you don't have access directly to what's going on. And it was not to share just the good, but you couldn't share the raw bad with kids like that. So you needed to use some sort of, you know, positive propaganda, as it were, you know? And I was leaving that behind. I was leaving all those support structures behind and heading into a new... So I felt I had a responsibility to keep that up. And literally for the first couple of weeks in the Netherlands, I was anti-everything Dutch.
Really?
I didn't speak the language. I didn't interact with nobody. I kept my bags packed. My parents are coming. And unfortunately, I got chicken pox, you know, so which meant my sister had to go to a completely new school by herself. And I've got this story where she comes back and each day she's learned a new word in Dutch and it's irritating me. You know, I'm like, you're learning the enemy's language, you know, what are you doing? Like, you know, and she's like, they're really nice and the food is great. You know, because she's also getting to a place where she's understanding herself. You know, she's growing into her own identity. So, and then I get to go to school and first day in class, and this is so vivid, it's huge, it's very different from a UK classroom. They've got these massive, because it's cold there, it's colder than UK, these massive like heaters in the middle of the classroom and they put me right next to it. And immediately I'm like, oh, what? Because I'm black, you know? And it's super warm, it's nice. And these two kids just come to me, blonde hair, blue-eyed, I kid you not, right next to me, and they just speak in this broken English. And that's how I got introduced to the culture. You know, from then on, it's just really a history of many, many friends.
I'm finding this so fascinating. How, you know, firstly that it's what they say, two children can grow up in exactly the same house and have completely different experiences, but also how you were resisting it and having, you know, the bag is waiting because you just will refuse. And then your first experience is like warmth.
Yeah.
And kids that are trying to interact with you. So what was then when did you, I want to say let go, but I also want to say open up, like surrender. When did you surrender?
The Netherlands was a very special experience for me because it touched on many things that were home, you know. It brought me and my sister together. This woman was amazing. She did her best to make us feel like there's nothing happening around us. So we were constantly in contact with my parents, you know. We called them, and there was a part about being there that as much as I felt guilty that we're relinquishing what the whole struggle was about, but you could really breathe. We really just decided to be kids.
Can I ask what you mean by that? Because are you saying that from just a personal sense of responsibility, understanding what's happening around you, or because you feel like you were told to do something? Or is it just we're guilty, we're far away, people at home, we see Khorba Sokola and Rona, we're just continuing life?
No, we were allowed to actually be kids. You see, the one thing that Lebo was saying, you grow up so quickly. You don't realize how quickly you grow up until you're around a situation where kids are being kids. And you're worried about the next meal, you're worried about this, you're worried, and they're like, no, you know, that's sorted. And this is the controversy with Exile. This is the part where people say, yeah, but you had it good. You can only have it good if somebody's willing to give it to you. And you don't realize how that it's not determined by color. You know, there isn't a race that is better at loving than another race.
But what is so important, I mean, we can watch marches and protests, and for me, the pain is seeing a child that is protesting and marching. The child is supposed to be a baby. And that is the reality of a lot of all senses of black, brown experiences, is children were never allowed to be children. So I think you sharing it the way that you are sharing it already explains so much about why we shouldn't be fascinated that there's a 6-year-old in a march. It's because the sad thing is those things catch up to you as an adult, you know. So I wanna fast forward without losing too much of the timeline and go to you, Lebo. I mean, at what point, when was the moment where you were coming back to South Africa and it was, you knew, Hore, I am back home? It wasn't like I might have to leave again. When was that thing of, Mogoai, this is it?
My family started transitioning back after the country started opening up in the early 90s. And then we moved back permanently in 1995. But we were coming back to visit. We came back to visit for the first time as a family together in 1992. And then we came back again in 1994. And then we moved back in 95. And those three experiences were three very different experiences. 92 was, euphoric, and also quite chaotic, because it was mass action. It was Kodesa. We were staying in Soweto. It was my first time seeing my extended family and my immediate family together en masse. I mean, I had grown up in a world without grandparents, without, my mother had two brothers who were in the US with us, and those were our only biological relatives, Everybody else was kind of, Auntie Mang Mang, Uncle Mang Mang, wa struggle, or, of families, collectives that we had kind of formed, connections we had made in that space. To see my own biological family en masse was intense. I mean, I was 13. And then also, what South Africa was going through at the time, that was a time of intense violence, collocationing. That was a time of jackrolling. That was, but also, it was this, it was a country that was really fighting with this transition, When we moved back in 1995, it was a very different experience. My family had split up. My father had left our family at that stage. So we were coming back on the heels of the trauma of that split, and now getting used to not just a new country, but a new reality of being, with a single mother and having an absentee father, and having grandparents who were stepping in to try to fill in the gap and support my mother, and now having uncles and grannies and a grandfather who have a say over my life, and it was really weird because, the contradiction of this country that's celebrating the euphoria of freedom, and my country, my own, country of my little family that is really deeply mourning, this radical change, mourning my father, mourning America, mourning what we thought was normal, but I'm grateful for it, I'm grateful that we came back at that time. I'm grateful for all of the trauma of it, because even now I realize that much of the trauma that we experienced was also experienced by many other people as well. There were a lot of couples that didn't survive the transition back, and for whatever reason, I think when you are away from home for such a long time, and my father was away for 30 years, my mother was away for 20. So in a way they became home to each other, Not only were they, partners, but they also represented South Africa to each other, And then when they came back, it was like each person had to negotiate their own relationship with their own family, with this new country, and also see the country through realistic eyes. I mean, my father was 19 when he left. My mother was 21 when she left. And now they were coming back, as middle-aged people, and that in and of itself was I think, just a huge and difficult transition for both of them. And again, they couldn't give words to that. How do you explain that to children? All of us were just living it, I look back at my mother at that period and I'm in awe of what she was able to do. You know what I mean? To be left by a man in America, pack up your house, your life, come back home, start afresh, raise your kids, and not collapse, not have a nervous breakdown, not have a stroke. She was my age when she went through that, and I wonder, I ask myself, it blew my mind when I hit 40, because my mother was 40 when that happened, and when I hit 40, I was like, my mom went through that. Would I be able to cope with such right now? So the transition back was a very difficult one. But also, because South Africa is fucked up and magical at the same time, It was like all of it at the same time. So, being exposed to, Kwaito, being exposed to South African hip hop in its infancy, being exposed to youth culture that was exploding. When we left Soweto, when we first came back, my family went to Soweto to stay with my grandparents. I mean, that was a whole nother just mind fuck, like to go from, to Hudula ko Rumung, le mme wa ka ko Soweto, like that was hectic. And then my mom got a house in Yeoville, and we were at Sacred Heart, which is where I know Malose and his family from, and Yeoville was an incredible space at that time.
It was completely different.
It was amazing. And I mean, you don't realize something. You don't realize how precious something is when you're in it, like to be in a space that was full of immigrants and artists and drug dealers and crackheads and brilliant people and parliamentarians and all at the same time. Like that was like my initiation into really understanding the complexity of South Africa. I'm very grateful for that space. I think if there's any space that could have helped me to make sense of my place in this country as it was transitioning, the physical landscape helped me to understand that. Yeah.
So for you, Malose, you coming back, did you know it was we're back? Were you resisting it because now you finally unpacked your bag, you got settled, now we're moving again? Like, what was that experience for you coming back?
And it's unfortunate, but you lose out on a lot of information that is now actual, like what's happening in reality. Because the footage now that is being obviously aired that side is not what's happening this side. It's almost sensationalized because they have to continue this. It's happening in South Africa, but what about this? What about politics? What about Nelson Mandela? Will we get the country back? And there was a time when obviously my dad came that side to say, listen, we're heading back home. And that whole idea of back home.
Did home mean Botswana or
For me,
South
it was
Africa?
Botswana.
Okay, so when he said we're going home, you sing Botswana.
I'm thinking, cool, back to Botswana. Then it's like, no. South Africa, that's your home. And the footage we were seeing on TV and the idea of what it didn't click. No. So much so that even the remember I left here at an airport in Botswana. So the idea of there being an airport here was still, so we landed Johannesburg, and I remember driving past the city. I'm like, but why don't they show us this? This is not bad.
Were you scared? Like that plane ride back?
Yes. Honestly, yes. We landed and that fear was still, we're not sure, we're not in SA, because that's how they're showing bang, bang, boom, boom. It's not rosy. Yes, we're accepting our African brothers and sisters to come back. The land is ready for you to take over. It was still like, are you sure you want to do this? And I remember the trip, because we went straight to Orlando,
Wow.
So we're seeing...
From airport to Orlando,
yeah. So you can see
scene.
Josie, this is 1990, Josie, we're passing it. When we hit, after Gold Reef. Yes. And you see that, I'm like, there's the picture I know. There's what I've been seeing on TV. That's, So even then we're like, okay, fine, cool. But the reception we got, okay, my grandmother, my cousins, the sand was there again, the heat.
Are these now people you didn't know?
It's people that we had seen growing up, but we had obviously lost contact with. I mean, last time I saw my cousin, he was literally falling over because he couldn't sit upright. And now he's running around and he seems to be the guy about town, in the neighborhood. And for a split moment, you kind of just forget where you're coming from and realize that this is, like it's cool. But I went to Banato after that.
And where is that?
Banato is the same neighborhood as Sacred Heart, but it's like Berea. Sacred Heart is observatory. So it's that economic divide that everybody seems to be very aware of. And I wasn't. I was like, I'm going to a school. They've got uniform. Let's go. You know, I get there, and the first thing when I realized that I was now back for good, I walk in, the teacher's not there. I'm a bit late, so I stand in front. I'm like, I'm looking for. They're like, hey. Now I'm going to Now they're like, what, brother? Like, no, I'm looking for the teacher. Like, wait over there, she's coming. So she comes, and everybody's been laughing now because they're like, this guy really, I didn't understand a word they were saying. You know, I hadn't spoken Zulu before. I had a stint of it in the UK with my sister, but I couldn't really communicate, you know. And I sat down. She comes in, she's like, Miss Lilibash. She's like, no, sit down. So I sit down, and this guy comes to me, Zoweto, and he's like, my brother, don't you know how to sit at the desk? So he takes the desk and turns it around and puts it down. That's when I was like, okay, I have to be aware here of what's going on. Because we don't have desks where we come from, you know? And I think from there, it was just a series. Like, as when Lebo was talking about Yeoville, there's so many things that happened in a space from 1990 to 1992. Because I ended up at Sacred Heart in 93, 94. But that build-up of the things that were happening, you know, the cultural explosion, the music coming back. I mean, there's a time when my parents were celebrating because for the first time there was my brother, there was my sister, we're all together. We'd never been together like that before. And that shaped who I am today. I mean, I still reference a lot. If we say the 90s in Johannesburg, you know, I get just tingles because I'm like, we started this whole thing, you know. Revolution really started there for us, and we're holding on to it because that's when you have got something that's yours. You own it. Do you understand? So I never look back. You know, I've got fond memories of the Netherlands. You know, I've got also memories of me running from the cops in the Netherlands because I was scared that they'd take me back. You know.
Where's back? When you say back where?
Back to what was shown on the TV.
Oh, okay, I got you. This is so amazing to actually understand because she's having her cop nightmares and then Luena Otaba Mabotja.
Yeah, because we'd been told, you know, remember I was coming from UK, vigilant, we're about to take on the government, and then I landed in what is technically utopia, and they're like, no, relax, don't worry, you know, be a child. So every now and then you'd glimpse into what was happening in the real world. You'd be like, ish, you know, I better be wary of what's going on that side. So, you know, one of the things that they said was, listen, don't mess this up because you're actually on borrowed time. And at any given moment, we might just request for you to come and be vigilant youth.
How?
And there's a time I was fairly naughty in the Netherlands. There's a time I was working at a construction, not working, I was playing around at a construction site. And I threw like this big rod and it made sparks and noise everywhere and the cops came. Oh man.
And you ran.
But they came to the house. I was terrified. And my godmother saw that face and realized that, okay, we need to, you know, correct a couple of things. But coming back here, what it does also is make you realize what was happening back then. Like, you see, I think you got your picture of the world earlier on. I really got it when I got back home, you know?
Yours was a warped,
yeah,
a projected version of reality.
Yeah, and it was more of, we got to hold on to whatever it is that this was created by and build on top of that, because as much as I might have different experiences outside, whatever this is needs to come out. It needs to blossom. It needs to, you know, and I think we also come from a generation that's willing to deal with the pain. And it's both sad and also it's part of who our heroes are going to be. Are those people that are going to be like this current situation with the whole COVID thing, you know? I immediately rolled up my sleeves. I'm like, what needs to happen? Everybody's like, what? I'm like, hey, look, you can't wait to feel a greater pain. There's pain now. Just get used to the smaller doses because it's probably coming you know, and we're ready to do that.
So let me ask this question then. We started at the top regarding misconceptions. Lebo, what are some of the misconceptions that you've heard about yourself, about Exile, about the fact that you grew up in America? What are those big misconceptions?
Gosh, I mean, firstly, I think with regard to exiled children in general, the idea that everybody was privileged, that everybody was safe, that everybody had it okay, that, I mean, being in your own country, having access to your family and your food and your culture and your language and your spirituality and people who look like you is such a privilege. It is precious. And you only know how precious it is when you don't have it, you know? So what we have been denied is the physical access in our formative years to this place. And
to
that's
your
something
identity. To your identity, you get separated from a part of who you are. And not to take away from the fact that your environment shaped you into who you are.
Sure.
But you are away from your roots.
Absolutely, absolutely. And people don't understand how precious that is and what a massive loss that is. As much as we were given other things, we were given this beautiful, broad picture of the world. We were given experiences. We were given access to other kinds of people and communities. But that connective tissue that you have to home, to yourself, to your culture, to your language, you know, it's taken me a very long time to figure out how to build that for myself, you know. The other thing is the idea that everybody who went into exile, I mean, you kind of get these the two big perceptions is that people who were very famous, you know, the Gwangwas, the Mandelas, the names that we know, that life was somehow easy for them, you know. But you listen to Malusi's story, it's trauma after trauma after trauma after trauma as a baby. You know what I mean? And then, so we don't acknowledge that. We don't honor that. We don't respect that. We don't give people the space, you know, to articulate that and what that means for them, you know? And then what we also do is we erase the people who don't have names. Because, you know, this struggle was fought by millions and millions of people, South Africans and also people outside of South Africa who will never know, you know? And they are also still reeling from trauma. There are millions of people in this country who are still reeling from trauma, who will never know, you know? So this idea that you know, that the activist space, or, you know, or the liberation is defined by people who have become, you know, the stupid celebrity word, which I really hate, you know. But like we take a big, complicated story that's filled with so many emotions and experiences, and we flatten it and turn it into something one-dimensional, and that is so unfair. It's unfair to us. It's unfair to the people who've lived this experience. The other thing is, I mean, for me in particular, coming from, you know, this hectic empire called America, you know, I mean, America asserts itself over the world, you know, the way that South Africa asserts itself over the rest of the continent, right? You know, I mean, we suffer from the mentality of empire, imperialism, superiority, you know, and because of that, it's like, everybody in the world has a relationship with America via American culture, films, music, politics, you know? And when people see me and, you know, hear me open my mouth, they have their own perception of America, and therefore, because of that perception, have a perception of me, you know? And that's a very difficult thing to negotiate. The interesting thing about this moment in history with Black Lives Matter and the riots that are happening right now in America is that I think the world is opening its eyes to what the day-to-day reality of being Black in America truly is, and how difficult it is. The psychological, the physical, institutional onslaught against Black lives.
But over and above that, I think we all just needed to take a moment to recognize that being Black anywhere in the world is hard. Anywhere in the world. And I mean, obviously this would be a whole other conversation. But the reality and what I'm deducing is there are sides to stories that you will never see. You will never see.
Yes.
So to draw the assumption, and I mean, I'm sure you might have experienced it because now you have a dad who, other than being an activist, is a musician. People, you know, every wedding you go to, it's his music. It might be completely removed from the actual life that he lived. Because now people see the part where we're clapping, but back then it would have been something else.
Yeah, I mean, as an adult, I'm able to reflect on it, and I think the amount of healing that we got in being in our, you know, the situation in the Netherlands makes me be able to talk about it, you know, and the truth of the matter is I was always jealous of everybody else for having so much access to my father.
Oh, wow.
You know,
I've always wanted to ask the children of struggle icons this question is, how does it feel? And I'm talking the Mandelas, the Tambos. How does it feel having a parent who the world celebrates, but you didn't have them?
Yeah, we talk about it. This was the advantage I think I had, and part of the closure I was able to get because of my age. And when it happened, you know, Sacred Heart was known as the school of exiles, you know, and we all shared, and I still am friends with a lot of those people. And one of the things is you have to let go of your mother or your father to do that thing. And you think it's over when you come back, but it's actually even more explosive here. And going back to your question to what are some of the misconceptions. With me, it was an extremely personal attack because we were told we don't know our heritage. We are not attached to who we are as Africans. And yet they've got pictures of my dad all over the place. They've got his music, and they think I don't have even just a minute piece of that in me to be able to celebrate being back here, that I'd be distanced immediately just because of the way I sound, just because of me being able to go and communicate. Like, you found it even at Sacred Heart, you know, you go inside the quad and there were pools of races. There were the Indians there, the whites there, and, you know, and I was one of the only people that could cross over and go and, you know, chill with the white boys, and I didn't have an issue with that. But because that existed here, it created another barrier, you know, because a lot of the angst and anxiety was coming from your own black brothers and sisters that were telling you, you're not black enough.
That's real. That's very real.
And I think what is so critical, we always have this thing as Batwabantu, that when a person, you meet them and they're not automatically speaking the language that you are speaking. It doesn't even have to be a South African language. There is something standoffish that comes. It could even just be that I don't understand isiZulu and I'm speaking Chivenda. There is that thing of you are not something enough. Do you ever feel, you know, between the two of you that you've been accused or projected that you are not African enough? And maybe for you, Lebo, people feel it expressed in your art, but Emma Lucy, who you're more behind the scenes, you know, you're not out there speaking about your culture, your heritage. Do you feel like you get accused of just not being African enough, not being black enough, not having enough proud heritage in you?
Yes, of course. I mean, there are constant reminders everywhere you go, you know. I am very comfortable, for instance, in the way that I'm dressed, you know, and dress culture is a big part of who we are as a people that is able to express themselves through so many different mediums that, you know, you should, if you know you're going to this place, make sure that you express yourself as a true, you know, dress the way. And I had that thought this morning. I was like, okay, fine.
We joked about it before we started shooting.
You know, and I'm like, but I'm comfortable like this, you know? And I think a big part of what we must realize in being able to share our stories, because the pain is in dealing with accepting someone else's stories by removing yourself from actually listening to it, is that you're going to be presented by Africans in many shapes, because we've had to be thrown all over the place. You know, at one point I had a sister in Cuba, a sister in Romania, my brother was in Tanzania, we were in the UK, my parents were were in the US. And for us to be able to come back here is a celebration we have every single year. But for us not to be able to share it with the people that gave us a reason to come back, that's a loss for me, because what else do I tell my daughter? Because I'm married to, my wife is the father's from the Caribbean islands, and you know, they are in the UK. She also was born there, and we continue to explode this diaspora idea, but here back at home, it seems not to be able to pick up roots. And those roots are very important, because for anybody out there that is feeling like they need some sort of identity, if this is not enough, if you can't tap into those roots, then what are you going to be looking for? Because we're not telling the stories. We're not perpetuating the cycle of telling an African story from this is my story.
But I think that this, what you just said, is exactly why I wanted to have this show, is the fact that we think we know things because we see them through our own goggles and our own lenses and understanding of life. We've had a conversation with a Tswana girl who identifies as white and Afrikaans because her story is so different. And the natural reaction is to reject something we don't understand. But I think, if anything, this is just a lesson for all of us. And I'm obviously grateful to the two of you for being able to share. It's a lesson that there are other sides that you haven't seen. I wish I could have you here all day, all night, so we could share all of the stories, but I will make sure that everybody catches up with you guys on social media so that they can ask all the questions that they want to about your stories. Final closing words, Lebo? What would you like the viewers to know?
I think the tragedy of apartheid is that it has made one of the defining features of South African identity the way that it excludes everyone. Everyone feels excluded in this place. And that's a direct result of our history, you know. So if you are rural, you don't belong. If you are Black and urban, you don't belong. If you are Black and foreign, you don't belong. If you are colored, you don't belong. If you are Indian, you don't belong. You know, it's so much embedded in our psyche. It has become a part of the fabric of, you know, in a very dysfunctional way, you know, part of the fabric of what it means to be a South African. And I think claiming belonging for oneself, you know, is a radical act. It's a loving act. It's an important act. It's important for people, you know, no matter what your story is, whether your story is a story of forced removals and migration, whether your story is a story of intercultural marriages, whether your story is a story of exile, you know, the story of South Africa is the story of movement across space and time and how that has shaped us as a people. It is a complicated and layered story. Claiming that story and claiming authority over it in the face of everybody who wants to tell you who you are, you know, is one of the most loving and liberating things that you can do for yourself. So we need to do that as kids of exiles. But I think everybody, even people who are born, bred, buttered in this country, need to do that, because our identity is evolving faster than we will ever understand. We're still having this debate. What are we going to say tomorrow to the half Zimbabwean, half Congolese kids who are being born right now? You know what I mean? Who will claim South Africa as theirs too, and rightly so, because they're born, bred, and buttered here, you know? So, I mean, claim your own story, claim your own identity for yourself.
Final words, Malusi.
Lebo has said quite a lot of what I believe, but I think what is keeps on coming up, and is a theme that I like to always focus on, because this story is a story that, you know, we're only telling for the first time on my side of the family. Like you said, I'm always behind the scene, but the idea that there's a constant network that we are not tapping into, you know, and we're not realizing that identity, you know, forms you understanding how to make those links is for me a very, very sad thing. You know, I'm making friends all over again with people that I thought I had lost because they didn't understand that I am that person that they want for themselves, in being very aware of where I am right now. So if I was to say anything to the viewers, is to just be aware of your networks. You know, the idea of family for Africans is not something that is blood. It's something that crosses so many different ideas and concepts that we're trying to protect, and we don't really have any physical representation of that except the fact that your neighbor knows how to take care of your kids. You know, just when I say my sister, I'm actually not even referring to you being a woman, but actually, you know, my sister, you can take care of my child. You know, and maybe this is more directly to the dads and men out there. It's like, look, I'm raising a daughter, right? I was brought up by very strong women in my family. It doesn't take away from the fact that that is who I see myself as being for my own family. You know, the support systems that we have come from borrowed, you know, knowledge systems, and the greater part of who I am came from seeing those mothers and sisters and aunts being around and doing what they needed to do while the dads were not there. And I'm very lucky to have that as a source of power for me to be able to do what I do. But it gets lost when guys just can't connect and share that. Because that's the one thing guys are really missing out on, is sharing their own stories. You know, we see it with the sisterhood, but the brotherhood is really lacking, you know.
Man, okay, in the hood. There doesn't need to be a sister or a brotherhood.
Exactly.
I'm going to just call it a familyhood.
Africanhood.
Yes. Let's close it on that note. I can't have said it better. Lebo, I love you. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you so much. This has been wonderful.
We've got to link up.
Lucy, thank you so much for coming through.
Thank you.
There's nothing more I can add. I mean, our guests have said it themselves. Claim your story, and family is not just about blood. Thank you for joining us. Next time on Unpacked.
A lot of my friends wrote me off, and I was like called a KFC.
Have you ever been accused of cultural appropriation?
It's not like I'm making money off African culture. There's like this Afrikaans group of people that have been bullying me online just for being this outspoken.
How do you and your partner have a conversation about how you want to raise your daughter?
I'm too white to be black, and I'm too black to be white. I'm just being myself, you know?
That's Unpacked with Relebogile Mabotja. New episodes weekdays at 5:30 p.m. on my YouTube page. Don't forget to subscribe. Television edited broadcast weekdays at 5 p.m. Open up with S3.